Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How's your day treating you?
Quite well, thank you. It's a beautiful day out here in California. It's not too hot yet. And and life is great.
Okay, you scared me. Last week when we talked, you said it would be in the hundreds possibly. When I'm coming, for those who are listening, I'm going out there. IDEA convention is going to be in Sacramento this year. So yay, I'm going to go, and Nora and I can hang out and all this. And then she said, oh, don't be surprised if it's well over 100 degrees. I said, you got to be kidding me. And I heard it's going to be in the mid 90s, which in Sacramento is really not that bad.
No, I mean, just friends of ours are just here from Cincinnati, which is more similar to DC in terms of just humidity and heat in the summer. And we were out walking the other day, and it was in the high 90s. And they're like, this isn't that bad. I'm like, what? Because I was roasting. They said, and I said, that's because it's not humid.
Exactly.
I mean, the dryness really does make a difference. It makes about a 15 to 20 degree difference in terms of feeling the heat.
Yeah, I'll be coming from the swamp, so it'll probably
be coming from the swamp.
Not too bad.
It'll be warm.
Bad. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So do us a favor before we jump into the conversation today. We've got an interesting conversation, so I can't wait to sort of jump into this one. Hit the like and subscribe button, share, post, repost, send these to your friends. We really appreciate it on the platform of your choice. And take a look at our YouTube shorts. We're starting to not only do it on Instagram, but we're doing YouTube shorts. And if you just search my name, it'll come up and you can see our sort of live. We're recording this visually every week as well as audio. So if you ever want to watch us, you can do it that way. And we're putting out some shorts that way, as well as through our Instagram. We're at Moving Convos on Instagram. So do us a favor, like, subscribe, comment. We really appreciate all of that. And speaking of California, later this summer, we're going to be coming to Southern California, aren't we?
In September the 10th, 14th, we're going to be at Blue Moon Pilates in Mission Viejo, and we'll be doing a full day on the low back. We'll be doing half a day on the shoulder and half a day on osteoporosis. So if you are working with clients with any of those conditions and want to know a little bit more, there'll be some theory, but a lot is going to be practical. We're going to spend a lot of time just going over exercises, looking at all the details of the exercises, how you want to modify and adjust for different conditions. And should be really a good amount of time. It's a beautiful studio, a beautiful place to be. So come on and join us.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, talk about a perfect time of year. It won't be as hot. It'll start getting a little bit cooler in Southern California. So it's going to be gorgeous, and it's close enough to the beach that you can really enjoy the weather. So please come down, enjoy, join us. We'd really love to see you. All right. Well, with all of that being out of the way, let's get into our topic today, because oftentimes we have a list of things that we want to talk about and we go over the list. And last night I was just reaching out to Nora and said, what are you thinking about for tomorrow? And she immediately came back with an idea. So why don't you propose what you came up with? And I love the thought.
This is what I proposed. So one of the things that is true about resistance training or strength training or working with different bodies is is the different ways that you can use concentric, eccentric, and isometric strengthening methods for different purposes. And I know in the Pilates environment, and again, more on detail what all those are, if those are words you haven't heard before, but in the Pilates environment, we don't always talk that way in terms of how muscles work and how we're building strength or building hypertrophy or building stability through these different methods. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Figure we can talk about it both for our professionals out there and for those of you who are just interested workout buffs that maybe want to just tighten up your routine a little bit.
And what's neat about this is, like you said, when you're throwing out terms that people don't understand, sometimes people can get very confused. Think of it this way. We're going to be adding additional variety. In fitness in general, we have certain variables that we change, that we can change, like duration. You can go longer. We can change the
Yes.
reps. We can change, the type of
Resistance.
exercise, the
Yeah.
resistance. We can change. There's a lot of different variables that we can do,
Mhm.
but this is going to give you a different type of variable where you can do it within the exercise itself. So you can continue to do the same exercise, but just change how you're doing it, which can make a huge difference. So we're going to be going into that. So that's what we talk about: isometric, concentric, and eccentric. So do you want to explain what those are?
Sure. Let's start out. All right, everybody, I want you to take your arm straight out in front of you. Take one arm straight out in front of you. Now, thinking about the bicep is that muscle that goes from your shoulder to your elbow, right? Exactly. If I make a Popeye, Brian's making a Popeye right now. He's got a good Popeye to pop. That's a concentric contraction of my biceps, okay? And also my brachialis and the muscles there, they're elbow flexors. But basically, that's a concentric contraction. It means that muscle is shortening, and that's how it's building strength. So we do a lot of concentric contractions. Yes. Now, if you take that same motion and you bend that elbow, now imagine you've got a really heavy weight in that hand. Like, let's say you've got a bowling ball in that hand, and you are going to slowly lengthen that arm out till your elbow is straight. You're still using the control from those elbow flexors, from the biceps and the brachialis, but you're using it in an eccentric fashion. Okay, so eccentric is what's called a lengthening contraction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that other phase. Like, we're always doing, like, if I'm doing a bicep curl, I'm doing a concentric phase and an eccentric phase. And depending on how I time those and how I emphasize those, I can get somewhat different results.
And in general, in fitness, a lot of times we focus a lot on the concentric. If you watch people work out in the gym, they're
Yes.
focusing on how much weight can they lift. And that's really their
Yes.
focus is up. And then you see their form can get sloppy on the way down. Again, thinking biceps, if they're curling up. And then on the way down, they're just sort of bloop.
Kind of drop it almost. Or they lose control of it. I mean, I've seen that. Yeah. Yeah.
It happens all the time with a lot of the novice. Now, if you're working with a trainer, the trainer's obviously going to want you under more control and whatnot. But that's not usually the focus oftentimes, when you read articles and things like that. And let's face it, for the average person out there, they're just focused on getting the reps done. They may not be focused on the quality of those repetitions.
So that's concentric, eccentric. The last thing is isometric, which basically means holding a contraction. So in this case, for example, I'm going to use this sort of a funny example. I was just hanging out a while ago with a goddaughter of mine. And she was about, I don't know, probably 14 months old. So she was pretty big at that point. I had not done the progressive weight training that mothers do to hold children for long periods of time. And I was holding her my right arm. She's like hooked on my right hip, and my elbow was bent for an extended period of time. And there was force, like I had to hold her up. That was an isometric contraction of that elbow, right? Of that biceps and that brachialis. So in other words, an isometric is holding a contraction for a period of time against some amount of resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's just those three things.
And that's often if you're getting back into fitness after an injury, a lot of times that's sort of where a lot of times we're going to want to start, and where people will start is more with the isometric. That's sort of the beginner phase. I'm recovering from a shoulder thing going on. And, when I was starting to go back, guess what? That's what I started with. I started more with the isometric than I did with trying to lift, weights again, because some of the range of motion can bother it. So, you're able, but I can hold certain ranges of motion with no pain. So we can begin to build that strength through an isometric contraction.
And one thing we often talk about again, this is sort of all common knowledge stuff. This isn't like cutting edge. This is just the stuff we talk about all the time. With an isometric contraction is actually a very quick way to gain strength. It's almost the quickest way to gain strength in an area, but only within a small range of motion. So in other words, if I'm holding that baby in my arms and I'm using that elbow flexion for, 5 minutes, I'm only stronger in that position and a few degrees more open and a few degrees more closed. It doesn't mean my bicep is strong through its whole range. So that's the other thing about isometrics, and that's what Brian's talking about in terms of rehab, is you can focus on one particular spot, like the pain-free range in his case, perhaps of his shoulder strength, and he can work on that just isometrically rather than going through a full range of motion that may cause pain.
Think of it this way. If you have a range of motion, I'm going to use the knee, for example. And let's say when you do a knee extension at 45 degrees, you have a point there's pain. Well, if you go up to 40 degrees, there's no pain. If I train at 40 degrees, if I really focus on that isometric contraction and increasingly load that point at 40 degrees, I'm going to actually gain strength. They say anywhere from 7 to 10 degrees, above and below that point. Then if I can get past that point and then strengthen up beyond that pain point, that pain threshold, then I can also strengthen above that. So a lot of times what happens is you begin to strengthen through that bridging of the area. So at that 45 degrees, I'll go to 40 degrees, strengthen, go to 50, 55 degrees and strengthen. And before long, I've actually increased the strength at the area where I'm the weakest, where I had the pain. And suddenly the pain has decreased and I'm able to strengthen that full range of motion through my concentric and eccentric. And that's sort of a sneaky backdoor way of beginning to build strength in an area when you do have a troublesome spot.
And I love that because it's so simple. Like isometrics are pretty simple. They're really like, just squeeze this or hold this weight and put your arm in this position. Or there's lots and lots of ways to do that. And those are two that I mentioned. So the classic in Pilates is the magic circle, right? Or the ring, squeezing the ring. Squeeze the ring and then you move your legs up and down or here and there. You do your abdominals, but you have an extended, let's say adductor squeeze would be a classic one. Or one that I play with a lot is actually even without resistance, just holding my arms up. So playing with like, just reach my arms out to the side and I'll hold them there for a minute or two without any resistance. Then I start to add light resistance, maybe a pound, maybe 2 pounds, just to, again, get some strength in that range. And then I'll slowly, like Brian said, move up a little bit, move down a little bit and strengthen in ranges around that. And with again, clients in pain, you can often find some ranges they're comfortable in, or just some, and you got to work in those.
You are bringing me back to Catholic school. There used to be we called it a torture method, but they called it, punishment, where they would make us hold books with our arms extended out to the side, holding books in our hands. And the naughtier you were, the bigger and heavier the books went, and you weren't allowed to let them go down. So you're just bringing me back to thinking, oh yeah, I remember that. And let's face it, even if you all of our listeners out there, just hold your arm out to the side and see how long you can do it for. Believe it or not, they're going to get fatigued with no resistance. Our arms do weigh something. So just by holding it out there for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, your shoulder's going to start to burn. Okay, so you don't need a lot of weight, especially at the beginning stages.
Yeah.
And this is great for our seniors as well. If you have a parent, a grandparent that you're trying to get into doing more, just having them stand up part way and hold out of a squat for 5 extra seconds before they stand up all the way. Small things like that, believe it or not, you can begin to build their strength in small increments, and it can work really well.
That's kind of where I was thinking of next. I was thinking of shoulders because that's my particular weak spot, and Brian's as well because he's rehabbing one at the moment. But I was thinking of the squat, right? Just bending your knees and hanging out there for a while. One of the tests I've started to do lately, which is super simple and remarkably effective, was trying to figure out which leg is stronger in terms of just general gross strength, not specific. And basically I'll say, okay, we're going to do like a one-legged squat. I'll just have them bend one knee. The other leg's still on the floor for balance, but all the weight's more or less, or most of the weight's on one leg. And we just chat for a while. I'm kind of looking at the clock and I say, just let me know when, you can't stand anymore. It gets really tired. And one leg will be 15 seconds or 30 seconds or 2 minutes, whatever it is. And then the other leg will be like, I could do this forever. It's like, okay, that's your weaker leg.
Yep.
Right. So sometimes I'll just do that too. And then I also say, okay, that's a clue for you in terms of working that weaker leg more. Right.
Yeah.
So if you're standing around waiting in line, bend your knee, come into a little mini squat, hang out there. Let that leg get some encouragement, get some strength, get some stimulation.
And again, for those who are purely sedentary, and I do think about older clients in general.
Yes.
And some of us have parents who are in that category now that they don't want to exercise. They don't like it. They don't want to sweat, whatever it is. Something simple as that can really help aid them in their quality of life down the road, because they still have to do stairs. If you're anywhere on the East Coast, steps, stairs, they're all over the place. And that's one of the things that they talk about. They are afraid, they don't want to go up and down stairs. And
Right.
sometimes
Yeah,
just
they're
have them.
nervous.
Yeah. And I'll say, okay, you're going to stand sideways, and just pretend like you're going to stand sideways with one foot on the step and one hanging off the other side, and just go down part way and hold that for 5 seconds, and then put the foot all the way down, and then come hold that again for 5 seconds, and do a couple repetitions. It's not hard. It's not like we're doing a full workout, nothing like that. And give them 4 or 5 things like that. And believe it or not, they begin to build strength. And then you can begin to change their angles, and you can say, okay, I want you to go a little deeper, or I want you to go shallower. You can begin to change that. And for those our older clientele, especially, it can make a huge difference. Even just holding on to a doorway, I'll have them hold on to 2 doorknobs. I'll say, open the door, hold on to the 2 doorknobs, and go into a little bit of a squat, sitting back in your heels a little bit, and just see if you can feel your legs working. Hold on with your hands. And they say, oh yeah, I really feel this. Simple exercise, easy way to do it.
I love it. And again, this is something where I'm thinking about the Pilates environment, right? We do some isometrics, but a lot of what we do there are things like, using the ring or that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But to Brian's point, I can have a client, let's say, and this is when I sort of traditionally do footwork, right? Take footwork. Well, instead of going all the way out, all the way back, all the way out, all the way back, they go out halfway.
Mm-hmm.
And then I might have them just hold that, or I might have them just light pulses going down and up an inch or so, just like a semi-isometric, something like that. And they'll feel like, oh gosh, now I feel the burn. This is also a way both to develop strength in those who may be deconditioned. It's also a way to advance and progress and give more sensation to your clients who are already pretty strong. Because there's certainly times in the Pilates environment where people go, I'm not feeling this isn't enough. Then I'll do things like, again, hold your footwork position, or take a long stretch, which is basically a plank with your hands on the foot bar, and just hold that.
Mm-hmm.
And then go 1 inch back and 1 inch forward, and 1 inch back and 1 inch forward. It's like a whole body isometric on that one.
We call it a saw in planking. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's just all these simple ways to really make something both more strengthening and more intense, depending on what you need for your client, with just simply changing the rhythm, changing how long they're holding a position, all those kind of things. So simple tricks and tips for getting things a little more efficient.
Yeah. And taking it from that point to the next, let's talk about eccentric next, because oftentimes in the rehabilitation field, eccentric is usually the next stage after this. And it's said that we can handle about 40% more weight in the eccentric contraction than we can in the concentric. So if I'm able to curl 100 pounds, I should be able to control down from the curled position to the starting position 140. Now, everybody's body is different, but that's what the science has shown, which is significant. But if you think about it, I have some, especially my women, who would love to be able to do a push-up, but that's something that as an older female, they never really trained themselves to do. And even getting them in a plank position can be challenging. But after we do that, I'll have them slowly lower themselves all the way down, and they're able to. They don't just collapse. And then I say, okay, get up any way you have to, put your knees down, wiggle your butt back any way you can, and do the same thing. And over the course of a month, 6 weeks, 2 months, they're able to slowly lower themselves even slower. And then we can progress them into doing partial push-ups and things of that. And they say, wow, I never thought I'd be able to do it. But again, they could control their body weight. Same with pull-ups. You start at the end position with your chin above the bar,
and then go down
and lower yourself slowly, and you can begin to build that strength, and it works great.
Yeah, in Pilates, we don't do a lot of that in Pilates, but there are 2 exercises on the trap table, and you do have to have the trap table. You can't do this on a tower, right? Our pull-ups, and then basically our like pull downs, right? Where you've got your feet in the fuzzies or on the bar, and your hands on basically on the rails, and you're pulling up and then releasing down. And when I train it the same way. It's like, okay, I start with somebody all the way up, elbows bent, again, head maybe above those little up the bars, and then slowly lower down. And then I help them go up, and then they
Yep.
slowly lower down. So same idea. It's like, how do you build that strength eccentrically first, and then you can get the full range of concentric to eccentric.
Yeah. And in general, in every exercise, you can focus on that. You can focus
Yes.
more on the eccentric. And I can't emphasize this enough. We don't focus enough on the eccentric. People only focus on how much weight can I lift up, not how
Yep.
much weight can I control. But in reality, real life, a lot of times it's that deceleration that we're doing. I have something really heavy that I pick out of my pickup truck in my hands. Well, guess what? I got to put it on the ground somehow. I'm not just going to drop it. So it's the controlling of it down so that I don't lose control of my body. There has been some research that has shown that uncontrolled eccentric is actually where a lot of injuries can occur, when people just
Absolutely.
fall to it and their
Yeah.
body sort of tries to grip to help out. So the eccentric really needs to be trained and needs to be focused on no matter what you're doing. I'll do it in footwork. I'll have them push out, and slowly lower, and push out and slowly lower. And granted, I'm not changing the resistance that much, but I can add a little bit of manual resistance, can't I? I can use my hand a little bit on the shoulder rest if I wanted to accentuate that eccentric a little bit. If that's my focus of the exercise, there's ways that you can do that to increase that focus so that they're focusing more on that.
And some of that's just changing the rhythm.
Absolutely.
Right? Just out, 2, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, in, 2, 3, 4. I mean, as for as a dancer, I do this all the time.
Yep.
And just playing with that, even with arm work, like let's say you're doing a bicep curl, right? In, 2, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, pull 2,
Yep.
right? And just changing that rhythm. So you're extending the eccentric phase and shortening the concentric phase is a really simple way to do that. And it can be actually kind of fun for clients because then they start to think about it that way. And if you are a client out there, this is a really easy way to just up level your workout. If you're used to doing,
Unbelievably.
a circuit at the gym, or even if you're used to doing your Pilates workout in a certain way, just think about like changing the rhythm. So instead of going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, which we usually do, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever the exercise is. And that's just a nice, easy way to add work. And the other thing that, Brian, that you said too about eccentric phase is, number one, it's strength developing. Number two, it is joint protecting. Right. And number three, it also creates more hypertrophy. So I wanted to go back to that middle one, because you said, right, that uncontrolled eccentric, obviously, like if you let like say I'm holding something heavy in my hands and I just let it fall, that ballistic hyperextension potentially of my elbow, especially when the joints are trying to hold themselves together, is a very likely place to tear something. Right? Either tear a ligament or tear a tendon off the bone or that kind of thing. And you think about like an Achilles rupture, that kind of thing, that usually happens when kind of eccentric, concentric are in conflict, and then you got too much tension, and that's where those kind of things pop. So that's another place, right, where you really are, if you really train the eccentric, you're training the control and the support of those joints through a full range of motion.
Yep. And I want to challenge everybody for your next workout to pick an exercise. I used to do this, and I still will do this with clients, but when crunches were the big rage and I would have to do abdominal classes, was the first time I started varying rhythm. I would have them do crunches, and I'd have them go first 1 to 1, up and down, up and down. Then we would do 3 on the way up, 1 on the way down, 3 on the way up, 1 on the way down, then reverse that. 1 on the way up,
1 on the way up,
3 on the way
down. Awesome.
And by changing that, and again, we're doing 3 sets, changing the rhythm each time changes how the muscle's working. So I didn't have to change the exercise. I added variety without changing the exercise at all. Now, can I do that with any exercise? Can I do it with footwork? Yes. Could I do it with a bench press? Yes. Could I do it with a squat, a lunge? You name it. You can do that by just varying that rhythm. And I like the 3 to 1. And it depends on how fast you count, because I can't tell you how many times the client is like, I'm down on 3, 1, 2, and it's already down. I'm like, oh, no, got to go slower than that. It's all the way down on 3.
Right. Exactly.
because by that time they're fatigued. But again, it's a great way to add that variety, but at the same time focusing on building strength, building hypertrophy, because hypertrophy really, from some of the research I've seen, is really built through that lengthening phase, because you're really slowing that portion of the repetition down. You're really building more of that hypertrophy. There was a study that was done on deadlifts that showed people who just lifted the weight and then dropped it. They only focused on the concentric, were actually getting stronger, but they weren't really developing muscular size. So for Olympic weightlifting, you may not want to. You may want to fit into your weight class. So you may want to develop strength without developing necessarily size. But by focusing on the concentric and eccentric together, really focusing on the descending, that was helping to build more of the muscle building, more of the hypertrophy as well. So especially, we've talked about sarcopenia, especially with GLP-1s and all of this, and with our aging population. So focusing on the eccentric can actually help build more muscle as well. So keep that, put that in your bonnet a little bit when you're working with these clients.
That's awesome. Again, I mean, I want to have this conversation partly because there's these really just simple ways to vary a workout that just can increase strength, increase hypertrophy, increase muscle mass, all those things, not by changing the exercises and having 100 new things to do. Because, a lot of clients, they like to do their 12 exercises, whatever they are, right? A lot of instructors like to do their 12 exercises, whatever they are. And that's fine, right? Again, I think consistency for a lot of clients is really key to them continuing to do the work, right? Some people need variety. A lot of clients just I want to do my one set over here, my other set over there. I do 2 sets over there. I do 3 sets, and I go home, right? Whatever it is. Or in Pilates, I do my footwork. I do feet and straps. I do it, whatever it is. And oftentimes that really does create consistency. So then just change the rhythm, change it up, hold a position, find a place where you're feeling some muscular activation, hold that position for 3 counts, then continue the exercise. One thing I wanted to bring up, which I just think is interesting, is the differences in doing something like lifting a weight and working with, in the Pilates environment, spring resistance. It's just a little bit different. And there's, some research to support this. I'm talking a little bit out of thinking, not necessarily so much supported by research at this point. But basically, there's a real difference in terms of how the body responds when you've got a weight in one hand, let's say a distal hand, like a bicep curl as usual, and you're releasing that weight. When you have, instead, you're doing a bicep curl on the reformer, so you're pulling against resistance as you come up, so against the resistance of the springs. 2 things on there. One, springs are different than gravity. So you're going to get a concentric resistance through a greater range of motion than you would with a hand weight. So let's just let me unpack that crazy moment there a minute, okay? So if I've got a weight in my hand and my arm's straight out and I'm doing a bicep curl, I've got that weight which is going against gravity, right? So there's gravity plus the weight until I'm at 90 degrees. Right? Then basically gravity is neutralized more or less. And then when I'm bringing it closer to my shoulder, let's say I'm doing a really tight curl, gravity is assisting me.
And that's when your arm is straight out in front of you, not down toward the ground.
Exactly. So I'm thinking my arm's straight out in front of me as I bend my elbow, right? And the arm is suddenly, the hand is over the elbow, then a neutralized gravity. And then if I keep bringing that in towards my shoulder, gravity is assisting me. So the actual resistance is kind of a curve, right? It goes up and then it goes down. With springs, it's just a little different because the spring resistance increases through the whole range of its extension, right? So if I'm doing a bicep curl with a spring, same position, arm straight, strap in hand, that resistance continues all the way through till my hand is close to my shoulder.
And it gets harder as you're going.
It gets harder as it goes, which with a weight, it doesn't. It's going to get heavier to a point and then it gets lighter. So the spring's going to get heavier all the way through. And that also means that the eccentric phase is going to be active from the moment you start all the way through. So it just changes. And I'm just using the bicep curl example, but just thinking too, this is that more complex idea of where is the weight? What is gravity? How is gravity affecting that resistance? And then what are you doing? How are you manipulating the concentric, eccentric phase by the tools you're using?
100%. When I learned how to be a personal trainer, that was one of the things that I was taught is, okay, what tools do you have?
Yeah.
And what is the resistance? Not what is the weight, what is the resistance? Because if you're using a dumbbell, a kettlebell, something that's just a piece of mass, a piece of metal, okay, all that you're really doing for resistance is gravity. So then it's your body angle if I'm bending over versus if I'm leaning
Right.
back versus if I'm leaning
Yep.
over, and the position of my arm, how gravity affects the joint that I'm working through physics is going to tell me how much resistance and how much my muscle has to work. And our bodies are incredibly efficient. We want to be the most efficient as we can. But if we're using a band or a spring or even a cable,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, a
Yeah.
cable is
Yeah.
going to be different because that's going to be a consistent throughout the range of motion for the most part. It's going to be pretty consistent of the same weight. But the band, the tube, the spring, those are all changing. They're dynamic loads. So they, as you pull farther, they increase the resistance. And as
Yeah.
you extend out, they, release that resistance. So that's going to definitely change how you're lifting, and it's going to change the exercise. So you can, if you're focusing on that eccentric, especially when you're pulling the farthest away from the anchor point, wherever it is, whether it's the spring or the tube or whatnot, you can really focus on that eccentric in the most contracted position and really
Right.
slow from there. So you can get a lot of benefit from it.
And this is, again, I know that was a little bit of a technical nerd attack, but partly what I like to bring that up is two things. One is, what tools are you using? What tools do you have? Because, some people have home gyms, some people go to their local gym, some people have a Pilates studio, some people just use body weight, right? They've just got their body.
Yep.
And understanding how weight and resistance are influencing your work means you can play with different tools. Again, if I'm in a gym, and I even do this some in my Pilates studio, I can play with the springs all day long because I work with Pilates all the time. But I also sometimes will work with free weights because it's a very different feeling. And so I'll do like all my arm work with free weights and see how that influences my strength. And honestly, I can get a little bit more strength going when I do some free weight work than just with the reformer. And I'm going to bring this up as a little bit of a funny piece there. I was working with a client a long time ago who was a client's husband, and he'd heard all about this low and slow workout to build strength. They're one of the many things that super slow. One of the many things that have come along. And the idea there, right, is you're doing a slow concentric and a slow eccentric, basically. And that was one version of playing with concentric eccentric, and particularly eccentric phase. And so we tried to play with that on the Pilates machine, and it didn't really work all that well. And the reason it didn't was really because, especially on the reformer and other pieces of equipment, not so much, but on the reformer, you have to stabilize your torso regardless of what other part is moving. If you're sitting up or you're kneeling or you're on a box and you're adding arm resistance to that, you can only take as much upper body resistance as your torso can support.
Yep.
Right. So whereas if I'm in a weight bench and I'm like sitting and my back is against something and I'm pushing and I'm stabilized externally, I can push a whole lot more weight. My torso can't support it necessarily, but I can push a whole lot more weight. So I just want to, again, just bring up some of those ideas of thinking about the environment you're in, thinking about how you want to maybe change it up just by changing rhythm or changing your tool. If you always do work on the reformer, try doing some free weight work.
Yep. And I'm going to throw this out there just anecdotally. I had a client who came to me, rotator cuff issue, and said, here's what my doctor wants me to do. And on the thing, it said, absolutely no rubber resistance.
Oh.
And I thought, interesting, because doing band work and whatnot, we've done for years, and tubing or bands or something like that.
Yeah.
It's very standard, especially in physical therapy, but in fitness as well. So I was thinking, that's kind of weird. Okay. And so we trained her just using traditional dumbbells and whatnot, no problem, and cables and things. with my own body, I decided, okay, I've been using nothing but bands for a long time, quite frankly, because I was lazy and it was quick. I could warm up my
Right.
rotator cuff real easily, and I was using fairly heavy resistance, and I was doing it no problem, then jumped into my workout. Well, one day I said, okay, I'm going to just try it with the dumbbell instead. It killed me. I couldn't believe the difference in how it felt. And I thought, okay, they're very different. And of course, the physiologist in me, I know that they're different. And I know gravity's pulling it from a different angle and whatnot. But lying on my side with the dumbbell in my hand, with my elbow to my ribs and doing external rotation, I thought, oh my gosh, this really does change the way it feels. So just adding that variety of changing from a rubber resistance to a traditional dumbbell using gravity made a huge difference. Much like going
Yeah.
down and doing W's off of the floor, just in a W position, squeezing my shoulder blades. I'm in external rotation, holding an isometric contraction then changes it entirely as well. So again, now I hit it from every angle I can and with every resistance I can, because I love the variety, but I'm also trying to strengthen it in every way possible.
Yeah, and again, we're just trying to remind you of all the possibilities out there for you, all the variables you can play with, because all of us, and I can certainly speak for myself anyway, we do our thing. Like we've got our workout, we do our workouts, and
Yep.
sometimes it requires some intervention or some reminder to do something different. Because it's easy to just go autopilot. I'm going to do this, and this, and then I'm done, and I'm good, and I've done my thing for today. Like check the box. The other thing too that I think is really important about doing some potentially free weight work or that kind of thing is, for the most part in life, many of our functional moves are going to be that lifting up a heavy grocery bag, lifting up a squirming 2-year-old. It's not going to be a resistance like an elastic resistance. That is not something we find so much in the ordinary world that we live in. We're mostly having a weight that's like, pick up the grocery bag or pick up the hairbrush or whatever it is. So that's the other thing too is, and I like what you said, Brian, about that experience you had, because I think that's a pretty common experience. I know for me, like I've been doing Pilates forever and this and that. And then I decided to play with free weights and I was like, holy moly, it was just a whole different experience and a very useful one. Because the other thing too that I find about working with free weights versus working with the springs or the tubes is I have to focus a whole lot more on that eccentric phase and controlling the joint action to support my joints in that eccentric phase. Somehow springs and bands, they somehow make that really easy because I think it's because it's more consistent.
Yeah.
Right. If it's like consistently getting heavier and consistently getting lighter. Whereas if you got a free weight and you're doing something with your arm, like it's kind of changing the resistance depending on where it is with gravity, what position your shoulders in, what position your elbows in, all those things. So it's a much more, in a funny way, it's a more dynamic load. Just because of how gravity's working on it, especially if you're doing something kind of wacky, which is what I tend to do with things like free weights. So,
and something to think about too, when we talk about rehabilitation, which you and I both specialize in, we go to the eccentric before we go to the concentric. One, it's going to build strength faster, I find. But two, it's easier to control. And we are trying to build strength from the joint out. So we're not just trying to make sure you're lifting this up. The client doesn't really need to know this. And as an instructor, you don't really need to explain this to your client. Just explain that here's the weight. I want you to control it down. Again, using the bicep, for instance. I did this with myself, again, with my shoulder bugging me. Okay. I've got some labral issue. Okay. And I found it was getting irritated with the bicep. So guess what? When I got back into it, I was like, okay, I need to increase this strength slowly. And so what did I do? I got a fairly light weight and I started holding it. I held it in a contracted position. I lifted the weight with my good hand, my unaffected hand, and then put it in the other hand and slowly lowered it down. And then used my unaffected arm to help lift the weight up and then slowly lower it down. So I couldn't do it myself. With a client, I will literally lift the weight, hold it up for them, and let them slowly lower it down, depending on the exercise. And it's something that's easy to do. Most people can do it, especially in a leg raise or something. You lift the leg up, you hold it there with them, you slowly let go, and you let them lower it. they're able to do it. And it's oh my gosh, I can do this. And it's a great way to begin to build that strength back so that you can get more dynamic. You can get them to a concentric contraction and get them back to health.
And to use that example you just did, again, taking the Pilates environment, if you think about feet-in straps, right? Feet-in straps is again one of my favorite exercises for so many reasons, just because you can't do it many other places, and it's really valuable for hip stuff. But you think about that. So, taking the analysis of that, you've got the support from the springs. So when you put your feet in the straps, some of your leg weight is already gone. Right.
Yep.
So you've already de-weighted the legs in terms of a leg lift, right? You're going down against some resistance, and you've got some assistance to come up, right? You've got resistance going down and assistance to come up. And again, that's a nice place to start. And then like that would be a build up, because it's very supportive. You can put as many springs on there as you need to, depending on the weight of the body in front of you. And then you start to take the resistance down, and then you start to work towards an actual like straight leg lift, like Brian, you're talking about. And so there's all these tools and all these ways to use our environment to develop strength, provide support, provide assistance, resistance, isometric, concentric, eccentric, all those things.
I'm going to throw another one out there that I use a lot, and it's easy, especially to teach to our clients who have knee issues or hip issues, and it's a step up. And I will have them step up with their unaffected leg. So let's say I have a right knee issue. I'm going to have them step up onto the step with their left leg, bring their right leg up, step down with their left leg. So they have to control their weight with their injured side and control it down, and then continue to repeat the process. That way I'm going up on the side that doesn't hurt, coming down on the side that can control my body weight, but needs that work. I was just working with this on a client just earlier today, and it really does increase strength fairly quickly because they are controlling their body weight. And it's something that they have to do. And these are the clients, especially how many of our clients, as they get older, they have an issue. They start going up a step, one leg at a time only.
Right.
Guess what? We can begin to build that strength by having them slowly lower themselves with that affected side. I hate to use the word injured. I know I probably should, but affected side.
I think affected side is a good way to do it. That's great, right? And simple. And that allows them to start to do stairs, start to do just normal functional daily life kind of activities.
And easy homework.
Exactly. Yeah, I love it.
I love it. And of course, concentric is sort of the granddaddy of all of it put together. That's the one that everybody does focus in on, because it's the one that everybody wants to shorten the muscle during the exercise. So I don't think much needs to be said on it, because that's the one that most people are focused on. It's the others that we really want to start putting our little bit more attention into, because they're the forgotten ones. You have a favorite child, and then you got the other ones running around here. So you need to give a little bit more attention to the others, for not only variety's sake, but also because they help build strength.
So one other thing to think about here is this idea of a co-contraction, or the idea of what's happening on one side of the joint versus what's happening on the other side of a joint. So I haven't really talked about that. And we're kind of acting like, for example, with the bicep curl, my initial example, I was just talking about the one side of the joint. Right? Which is what we typically do. But the idea there, going back to the bicep curl as an example, if I am doing a slow controlled bicep curl, I'm also doing a lengthening contraction, an eccentric contraction of my triceps, the opposite side of that joint. And if I'm doing a eccentric contraction of my biceps, I'm doing a concentric contraction of my triceps at the same time. So some of what that gets to is, again, thinking about this in different exercises. Where are you trying to target the eccentric? Where are you trying to target the concentric? And then just choosing your angle, choosing your resistance, or choosing your cueing to focus on the eccentric or the concentric phase you want to focus on.
And by slowing down in that way, you're also forcing the opposite muscle, the co-contraction muscle, to assist with the movement. And that balances out the joint. We tend to forget, And again, this goes back to how I learned how to train is I didn't think about the muscle. I focused more on the joint when I started. So I was like, okay, what do I want this joint to do? And then what are the muscles that are doing that movement? And then how do I load those muscles? So we really want to think about the joints. So if we're thinking about a bicep curl, well, guess what? The elbow joint is going to be affected as you're curling the weight up. And
Right.
as you're slowing it down, it's the tricep that's controlling that, but it's really helping to balance out the joint itself. So it's giving the joint added stability. Whereas if you just let the weight flop, well, that opposite muscle really isn't doing anything. It's not helping to
Right.
control the joint at all. So the joint is less stable in an, a eccentric contraction that's ballistic or one that's just sort of a falling apart.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you think about, and this gets to a little bit of a, what they call, there's some kind of paradox, they call it the quads and the hamstrings,
Mm-hmm.
which behave weirdly.
Mm-hmm.
At least some parts of them do, because, a good chunk of the biceps or the hamstrings are two joint muscles. They cross the hip and they cross the knee.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a two joint muscle, the basically rectus femoris, the one quadricep muscle across both the hip and the knee. And because of that, and because, let's say, if I'm bending my knee or I'm like going into a squat, I'm flexing my hip. So I would be shortening my rectus femoris at the hip, but I'm lengthening it over the knee. And the opposite's happening with my hamstrings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm shortening it at the knee and I'm lengthening it at the top.
Yep.
So the funny thing about that is those muscles don't actually change length terribly much in something like a squat. They do another exercise, but a squat, they kind of don't. So you're almost doing, you can basically target those concentric or eccentric just by playing with cueing and by playing with where you're putting the focus, because both
Mm-hmm.
of them are going to be working in both directions during that exercise, ideally.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't always happen that way, but you're hoping it happens that way. And theoretically it can happen that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Two joint muscles definitely affect things differently when you're in motion. A row, for instance, gets the bicep and tricep differently because they're both two joint muscles in part of their heads. So as you're
Right.
pulling something, part of it's shortening and part of it's lengthening, and vice
Right.
versa. So much like the hamstring and the quad, you get that when you're talking about gross movement. However, if you're just doing a knee extension or a knee curl and the hip is stable, you're getting much
Right.
more of a pure contraction of the muscle because you are shortening one and purely lengthening the other. But let's
Right.
face it, that's not real life. Real life,
No.
our bodies are moving. They're in motion. We're squatting. We're picking things up. We're taking a step up. We're pulling. We're pushing. We're twisting. Our bodies are constantly in motion. So the joints are always needing to be balanced by using all the muscles that are connected to it. And all of them should be in control during the movement. That's going to
Yep.
help
And
the joint the
that's
most.
right. And that's again where, just doing things kind of slow, playing with rhythm, playing with some isometrics, like all the little tools we talked about can really help that. One other thing
Mhm.
too, I'm thinking about a couple of clients actually, who just cannot move slow. They kind of like, they just come in and they just sort of slam, boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom. Like if it's footwork, for example, the reformer or whatever, like they're the ones who are always clanging their carriage in because
Speedy
they just
Gonzalez.
don't. Yeah, and
That's what we call them. Yeah.
they just don't control, right? They're just, control is not their thing. They're just like boom, 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 and those are challenging clients sometimes because if a client's got that speed, if that's their tempo in life, they have a hard time
Mhm.
slowing that down. But those are
Mhm.
the ones that'll often say, okay, let's just slow this down. Let's do 1, 2, 3, okay, and then 1, 2, 3 back, and they look at you like I'm going to die and be bored to death. But the challenge that I find with them is they are exhausted.
Yeah.
Like when I make those Speedy Gonzalez clients really do it sort of slowly and with control, they really feel how much the muscles are working. Because
Yep.
speed and momentum, that takes a whole lot of work out of things.
Yep.
And sometimes you want to train momentum. So not to be, to say momentum's bad. If I'm doing jumping, I've got to train people to understand how to
Absolutely.
use that momentum. For example, if I'm training a thrower, I've got to work with that. But on a lot of other things, I want to minimize that momentum. So they're having to control the whole movement out and the whole movement in, because that's going to develop the most stability at the joints and the best strength and coordination all the way through.
I will sometimes, depending on the client in front of me, what their natural tendency is, I usually will want to do the opposite of,
Right,
because
right. Exactly.
one, they're very comfortable. I'm thinking of a client. As soon as you describe this, I'm thinking of a client on any type of activity. He sort of snaps into his knees and explodes
Yes.
into no matter how much weight I put on there, he
Yes.
automatically snaps into it and is almost explosive in the exercise. So for him, I want to slow him down, constantly focusing on slowing him down. But at the same time, we also have the client who wants everything to be at a snail's pace. Every
Yes.
repetition can take 40 seconds. And you're
Yes.
watching thinking, how do you move through life this slowly? It's not possible. But again, you and I both have taught extensively in Asia. That's how a lot of the Pilates is taught there, because they want to perfect the movement. And it's one
Right.
thing to perfect, but I'll tell people, I need you to move at the speed of life. You need to move normally. And when they hear that, they go, oh, so I say just a little bit faster, a little bit fast, so that they're not getting into momentum necessarily, but
Right.
just getting them to just normal speed can be a challenge in exercise.
Yes, I've definitely seen both of those. I think I had one client who basically would spend 40 to 45 minutes on footwork.
Oh, geez.
And it wasn't like she was doing a whole lot of reps. It was just, and we're going out, and we're coming in. Right. And again, if you're trying to pay attention, going slower will often help.
Yep.
But for a client who I know enough and I've worked with enough and I know that they have good movement patterns and that's not, they don't need to focus like that, I'll just say pick up the pace. I'm going to
Yep.
have you go out and in. And I'll also, even with clients who have a nice, easy rhythm, I'll have them play with it too. And
Yep.
sometimes, like, for example, knee stretch, I do this. I like to do this a fair bit with knee stretch, is take it faster. Out, in, and have a little bit of that ballistic quality to it
Yep.
while maintaining control, right? Their pelvis is still organized, everything's working well, but they're just like out, in, because sometimes a client has to train for that. I worked with somebody who was a skeleton sledder. I was called suicide sledder, but a skeleton sledder in the Olympics. And basically they get all of their power and all of their speed by running 3 steps in a crouched position. And then
Yep.
jumping, stomach first onto their board, and then going down the run. And so we had to get like power in that boom, like you got to be able to push off, like boom. And going slow wasn't helpful in their case. They needed to really work on speed. So we played with that. Pilates wasn't the best environment for that, but we played with some of that. It was actually pretty helpful, just to get that speed going and that
Yeah.
reactivity going.
Keep in mind, that's also real life. Reaction
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. No,
If you need
absolutely.
to, something happens, you need to be able to respond. And oftentimes something happens in life, you need to respond fairly quickly. You're filling something up in this, off the sink, and you turn around for a moment at the stove, you turn around and water's going all over the floor. You have to move quickly. Your body has to move fast enough in order to turn off the water and, take care of the situation as quickly as possible. If you have children, that happens all the time. You turn around for 1
Exactly.
second, the next second, oh my gosh, they're on a ladder. How'd the ladder get there? I don't know, but the kid's on the ladder. Oh my gosh. Things happen and you
A
have
high
to move
chair is going
quickly.
over. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
that's
Or the
real
little
life.
dog runs under your foot. Like that's all my older clients, particularly who have little dogs that are
Oh
often
my
not very
gosh.
well behaved. And it's like, good Lord, the number of times they almost trip over them, step on them, etc. They've got to be able to like pick their foot up and change directions instantaneously, or they're going to squish the thing.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yep.
all those reasons.
Yeah. So hopefully this has given you some ideas on how to change your own exercise routine. I don't know about you. I get stuck in a rut. We all do, I think.
Absolutely.
And we get comfortable doing the same exercises. And what you'll notice is you're doing the same exercises at the same weight, the same resistance, the same number of reps, and you're listening to your music more than you're focusing on your workout. And then it's almost like you've got a checklist. I did that. I go
Yeah,
home now.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
it's
I'm
like,
done. I did my thing.
exactly. I did my thing and now I'm on to the next thing. This is a good way for you to add some variety, build some strength in ways that you may not have before by changing pace, by changing focus, on the isometric or the eccentric. We didn't talk about pulses, but you can even add a pulse in there, which sort of becomes a little bit more isometric because you're starving the muscle within that small range of motion of additional blood and oxygen. You're sort of really pumping, and then you release and you get an influx of that oxygen into the muscle.
Nice.
So these are all ways that you can really vary your own workout and your client's workout to give them, fun, give them a little variety. And it's going to increase their strength over time.
And I want to add just one last little piece here, which is if you teach group classes, like I'm thinking about all my group reformer teachers out there, this is a fantastic way to take a basic workout and just up level it. Just change the rhythm, do some isometrics. Your clients would feel like it's a whole new workout and you haven't changed any of the exercises. Really easy way in a group setting to add new stuff without creating more challenge or more, potential danger for your clients.
Especially the clients who have already mastered it. Their body knows what they're doing.
Right.
Then it's easy to add on to that. So yeah, that's perfect. Great environment to do that too. Awesome. Well, I hope we gave you something to think about over the next week. Next time you go to the gym, hopefully your brain is going, oh, let's try this. Let's try this with my client or on my own body. Let's try this and see how that works.
Yeah. Or in the Pilates studio, right? Just play with it.
Exactly. And if you do us a favor, give us a comment when you see us on Instagram or hit us up, movingconvos@gmail.com, and say, you know what? I tried this. It worked awesome. Or it didn't work like I thought it would. It did this instead. Whatever it is, share with us. We'd love to hear. And if you have any topics or anything that you would like us to discuss, do us a favor, hit us up, ask us, because last week we talked about the iliotibial band and literally that came in an email that I got earlier that day. So a lot of times it sort of sparks some of our creativity as well. Like, oh my gosh, we haven't talked about this yet. Absolutely. So hit us up on email, movingconvos@gmail.com. We always write back. We'll always get back to you. Promise that. You can also check us out again. Instagram is the best way to check out our Anatominis. We've just recorded a bunch. Those are going to be out pretty, I saw the first one released last week. So those will be fun for you to see some new exercises and whatnot. So yeah. And so for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye, guys.